Okay, so this is a video walkthrough reviewing the two very basic ways we learned how to edit using Adobe Premiere in the last class. If you remember, we looked at two ways to edit. One was using the ins and out markers on our source footage, and then the other was dragging our source footage to the timeline and then using the razor blade tool to make the cuts that we wanted. So the first thing that we'll do is create a new project with Premiere. If you don't have Premiere already open, please open it and then hit File, New Project. This menu will appear. The default settings on this are fine, so I'll just leave them as is. The only thing I'll change is the name of my project. I'll call it Test Sequence 2 and hit OK. Then it asks us what aspect ratio, what format we're shooting in. So here we're going to specify the aspect ratio and the frame rate that we would like our project to be in. Our homework needed to be shot at an aspect ratio of 1080 by 1920 and at 30 frames per second. So I'm just going to choose this HDV setting, or this at 1080 and 30 frames a second, progressive. I'll hit OK, and my Premiere interface should come up. If your Premiere interface doesn't look like mine, just go to Windows, Workspace, and change your interface to CS6, and it should look more similar to mine. So the first thing that we want to do is import our source footage. So I'm going to go to File, Import. Let me find my folder. And I want these three media files. Two of them are .mov QuickTimes, and then the other one is an MP4. So we'll import all three of these. And when they're imported, you'll see that they'll show up in our film bin here. So on the very left, that's where all of our source footage kind of lives. We can click onto the name to change it. These names are fine, but you can give your footage more descriptive titles. This left window here is if we want to play our source footage, we'll just double click and it'll appear on our source footage. So we can play it, scrub through it, etc. This right window is where edits that we make is basically our timeline window. Edits that we make, any footage placed on the timeline will appear on this right-hand screen. Our timeline is down here. That's where we're going to do the most of our work. And on the bottom left here, we have some folders for effects, information about the footage, and then a media browser. So the first way that we learned how to edit was to set ins and outs using our source footage. So let me select this source footage from the Craymaster cycle. I'll double click that so it appears on my source footage window, and I'll kind of scrub through it to see which scenes I want to keep. So I like this scene here of this kind of creature fixing his hair. So I want to take that scene and nothing in front of it. So what I'm going to do is find a spot before this scene begins and using one of these cursors set my in point. That will make it so that the beginning of my scene is basically where I want it to start. So now we'll find where I want it to end. Let's end it where we then see this creature again sort of dancing. So we'll choose this spot and we'll set our out point using the out cursor. So now we basically cut our clip using the ins and outs. So the only footage that will appear is where we set an in and out point. So in order to take that to the timeline, we're just going to select it in our film bin and then drag it onto our timeline. So you'll see that when you do this, you'll get two tracks. You'll get a video track and then an audio track. As I mentioned in class, it's sort of uncommon to edit the onboard audio with your video. Like anything that we shot in a camera, we're probably not going to use the audio that we shot with the camera. So let's just delete the audio for now. And how we do that is we'll control click on the audio track, hit unlink, and then we can select the audio and just hit, that didn't work. Select the audio and just hit delete. So now we're left with just the video track. You can see though on my right hand, my timeline viewer, that the video is small. So what we need to do is scale it up. And that's very easy to do. We'll just select our video track, hit control click, scale to frame size. And that will scale our video up to the size that we want it to be. So now when I scrub through my timeline using my playhead, I can see the footage that I have on my timeline reflected in that right window. So let's edit some scenes together. I have this other scene here in the film bin of it's called a slow motion close-up of a mortar firing. So if we play this, we'll kind of see this mortar firing. So let's find a way to kind of incorporate this as part of our scene. I'm going to do a quick edit with it using the ins and outs. So I maybe want to get rid of some of this footage in the beginning. So I'm going to kind of scrub through it to where the mortar fires, 23 seconds in, and that's where I'm going to set my in point. And I want my out point to be, when we can no longer see sort of the mortar in the sky. So I'll just move forward to maybe about 5 seconds and set my out point. So basically I just did the same thing that we did earlier. I used the ins and outs to kind of select the portions of my source footage I wanted. So now I can do the same thing. I can take this footage from my film bin and drag it into my timeline. So now when we scrub through the playhead, we should first see this mortar firing and then the continuation of the footage we originally placed on there. Again, I want to get rid of my audio, so I'll just select the audio, control click, unlink, select the audio again, and just hit delete. So now I'm left with a video track that has no audio track. So I think that this mortar footage would go well, kind of right before we see this aerial shot of this building from this footage. So I can use my razor blade, instead of setting my ins and outs, the other way that I have to edit is to use my razor blade tool in the timeline. So I'll find the frame that footage that I want kind of appears right there. So I'll find the frame right beforehand. This doesn't have my tools. And then in my tools, mine are here on the right. In your interface, it may be on the left. But I'm basically going to take my razor blade tool and I'm just going to make a cut right where I want it to cut. And you'll see that the kind of title duplicates. If you want to change the size of your timeline, you can scroll through here and it'll make it bigger. And so you can kind of detail into the frames. So you can do that through here, or you can do that, and then you can kind of scroll through your frame, through your entire timeline using this cursor down here. So what I've basically done is use my razor blade tool to make a cut kind of right in the middle of this original footage that we had, where I want to insert this new footage I have of this mortar firing. So in my tools, I'll go back to my selection tool. I'll kind of create a space in the footage where I made the cut, and then I'll bring the new footage kind of in there to fill the gap, and then just close everything up. So Premiere has a kind of nifty feature where it will sort of snap to where the gaps are. So as you can see, when I scrub now through my footage, what I've done is split this original Craymaster footage in two and inserted the mortar firing footage in the middle. So my cut now looks something like this. So I have this other footage too of these cranes flying over the city. So I want to find some way to kind of incorporate this into this video too. So, I don't know what part of it I want. So instead of using the ins and outs to make cuts, I'm just going to drag it to my timeline and use my razor blade to cut the footage where I want it to go. So I'm going to take it from my film bin and bring it to my timeline. I'm going to put it on a separate video track. It's a really good practice to just give everything its separate track. It kind of gives you more control. I'm going to do the same thing to get it to be the same size. I'm going to control click it, scale to frame size, and that'll make it the size of the frame. And then I want to delete the audio. So I'm going to control click the audio, hit unlink, select the audio, and hit delete, and now I'm left with an audio-free version of my video clip. So let's find a good place to insert this crane footage. I think it kind of makes visual sense, maybe right after, this kind of sequence of this creature sort of dancing in this room. So I want to get rid of that black that happens. So I'll use my razor blade tool. I can detail into it here. And then I'll use my razor blade tool to just cut the end off, that black, where that black kind of occurs. I don't want that. And I'll just get rid of the very end of this scene. When your cursor goes red like this, it means you can kind of pull your footage in and out. So any cuts that you made, if you need to lengthen the scene and you want to get that footage back, you can just pull it in and out. I liked where it was, so I'm just going to bring it back. And then insert my crane footage. So I'm going to shrink my timeline again and move my playhead where I want the crane footage to start. And I'm going to go ahead and put my crane footage just right there. So now what I have is this edit that shows the beginning of the scene, cuts to the mortar firing, shows the end of the original scene, and then continues with these cranes flying over the city. I think these cranes flying over the city are too long. We probably want to keep this at around 30 seconds. So let's go to 35 seconds here. I'll use my razor blade tool again, put the cut where I want to cut the footage off, go back to my selection tool, select the part that I want to delete, and just hit delete on my keyboard, and now I've gotten rid of it. So now we have a very quick, short, 30-second, quick and dirty edited video using Premiere. We used our ins and out tools and the razor blade tool on the timeline. We can save our project, and then we can export it as a .mov file. So we'll hit File, Export, and we'll choose Media. And then this export window will appear. And the format we want, they give you different format choices, but we'll use a QuickTime, which is a .mov file. We can leave the preset we can change the preset to either a custom one, or we can do, like an NTSC, which is a standard widescreen format, but we'll stick with custom. Then in the output name, we can click on this. We can change the name of our movie, so we'll call it Test Edit. And then we can change where it's saved to. I'll just put it, where I put my other files. So I'll just put it in the same folder that I had the source footage, but you can save it wherever you want. And then here we can either choose to just export our video or also export our audio. Since our video is silent, I'll just keep export video hit. I'll hit OK. And it exported my data. So now if I went to look, I would have my video. So it's going to render my video. And when it's done, I can go ahead and just look in the location that I saved it in. Let me just open up my Finder. I'll go to that file that I went to. And my video is here.